Hey there, everybody. Welcome back. If you've joined us before, and if you're new, we're so glad you've joined us for the first time. My name is DJ Munzik. I'm the head of marketing here at KETIV, and we're so glad you're here. Hope your week is going great. Today, we're joined by Jeff Perez and Brian Mongkolpoonsuk from KETIV's customer success team. And let me tell you, you're in very good hands. Some of you already know these guys and work with Brian and Jeff on a nearly daily basis. They are some of the most knowledgeable and plugged in employees at KETIV. They know the most about our customers than anyone, if you ask me. And they've been talking with customers recently for the past 6 to 12 months, working directly with the Autodesk strategic go-to-market team to ensure they have the real pulse on what's going on with advancements in AI, especially as applied to Autodesk and how it's impacting engineering and design across manufacturing. So we're going to jump into that today. But before we jump into that, I want to talk a little about next week. On Thursday, July 2nd, we'll dive into more of a technical details of how AI is being applied, especially in the Autodesk stack. And Jeff and Brian's going to share that session and link with you shortly. That session is part of our popular KETIV Virtual Academy series. So if your engineering team isn't taking advantage of our free academy where we regularly share training, utilities, and more, please make sure to go to ketiv.com/academy and share that link with your engineers so they can get that free training. We are live today, so we definitely welcome your questions in the Q&A panel here in Zoom, or if you're joining us from YouTube, you can hit us on live chat there. All right, that's enough from me. I'm really excited to hear more about where AI is taking engineering and design. So thanks once again for joining us. And now I'm going to turn it over to Jeff and Brian. Take it away, guys.
Thank you, DJ. Thanks for that warm introduction. So, good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, those of you who are joining. As DJ mentioned, I'm Jeff Perez. I'm a customer success manager team lead here, and I'm joined with Brian Mongkolpoonsuk, who's also a colleague of mine. And he's on the same CS team as me as well. So, as always, Brian, it's good to have you on this session with you today.
Yeah, great to be here, Jeff. So we've really been looking forward to this one, and it's probably one of the most common and popular conversations that we've been having with customers today. And I think a lot of people on the call are going to recognize what we're describing today. And I've noticed a lot of new names that I haven't really spoken to before. So that's actually good because we can actually a lot of the stuff that we talk about can resonate differently to impact the broader customer base or maybe not customer, just if you're just a viewer tuning in. Maybe this can help broaden your horizons of where AI is headed and just workflows in general that we've been talking about on a day-to-day with our customers.
Yep. And as DJ mentioned, just another little bit of housekeeping information. So if there is any questions throughout this entire presentation, just feel free to drop those in the Zoom webinar questions area there. We'll make sure to get those at the very end of the session today, okay? Cool. For today's agenda, really have three key sections that we plan on covering today. The first one is really going to be what the AI shift itself is and what it actually means to various manufacturers out there and throughout the world, and how this is a bit of a different technological wave. The difference here than some of the other different ways we've seen historically. Then Brian and I will then kind of dive into how this is going to affect many of our ongoing businesses out there and what impact you're going to see and how you could change this from this AI and really adjust and go into more measurable ways within your engineering organization. And lastly, we'll close with the KETIV edge and how we'll be able to kind of transform today's conversation and make it something turn this into something that's actually going to work within your operation itself.
Yeah, and DJ was alluding to a link to next week's webinar. So just a FYI, so today's topic is more of a high-level business impact, new idea, discovery type conversation. So if you'd like to see more of a technical demonstration on Inventor, Fusion, and Vault, scan the QR code here on the top right. Same time next Thursday is where we'll be joining our colleagues, technical colleagues, to deliver that for you guys. And we'll also be providing this at the end of the PowerPoint as well in case you miss it. So with that
Okay,
said, let's set the stage, Jeff.
cool. So the very first section we're going to dive into, and that's really the AI shift itself. It's something that we're hearing quite often. It's a phrase that many individuals out there are hearing around, that this kind of phrase is getting thrown out there quite a bit. And I believe the best way to kind of dive into this, something that Brian and I thought would probably be a good idea, is really kind of paint a picture and look back at some of the historical timelines of how we've gotten here today in terms of overall history. And I think the best way to do that is going through our engineering technology evolution sort of timeline that we've painted here. And I'll start off in the very beginning. So if we go back in time a little bit, back into the 1940s, this is where manual drafting was essentially introduced. And this is where engineers were literally hand drawing everything utilizing pencils, papers, drawing on T-squares. And at that time, if engineers went through any different revisions or anything that needed to be changed, what engineers had to do was completely redraw everything from scratch. And then moving from here, going into the introduction of some of your design tools, you saw that in 1980s, 2D CAD arrived. And AutoCAD was one of the leaders out there. It was one of the first products that introduced 2D based design. Now, what really changed in terms of like an overall upgrade for users was they didn't have to sit there and redraw everything with pen and paper. Now, something that a revision that took them minutes was really changing them, really now it's taking minutes to accomplish now within 2D AutoCAD. And then continuing from 2D AutoCAD, we went a little bit more advanced. And in the early 1990s, 3D parametric modeling was introduced into some of the leading products out there, Inventor and SolidWorks. And really, what we saw was a whole unique design difference in terms of how engineers were creating products, models for their various business. Now they were able to automatically update products and assemblies by literally changing a dimension, and they would see all that update in the flash. And then moving on.
Yep. And then late 90s, so a lot going on in the 90s here. So PDM, product data management, and design control. So you're able to now centralize, have a central source of truth for your engineering data, no longer have to save it on a shared drive. And then you can also collaborate more efficiently with a PDM tool. You're able to see who's working on what, check in and out files like you were to go to a library. You're able to see the latest revision and not accidentally manufacture an older revision because that was something they referenced in an old email that maybe that was the previous workflow. So PDM really, this is all of this on the screen here is KETIV's bread and butter, and PDM is definitely one of the areas we excel in and help our customers. Then fast forward to the 2000s is design automation. If you're trying to get your design and you know what the designs look like often, instead of having to create it from scratch, you can actually have APIs or rule-driven configurators. All you do is input a couple numbers or information into a box, and then you'll click go, wait a few minutes, and all of a sudden you have this complex 3D design that may have taken you days, if not weeks, to design. You can have in a couple of minutes. So that's where another one of our bread and butter, and it's a value that a lot of customers definitely take advantage of. Then there's simulation, being able to proactively validate your designs early on rather than, creating it, prototyping it, crashing it, and then finding out hundreds of thousands of dollars later that, hey, actually that wasn't the rest of the design. Simulation takes care of all of that beforehand, reduces the design cycle time and the engineers and all the headaches, and validates it proactively rather than reactively. And then 2010, so we have PLM and cloud, product lifecycle management. Now engineering can talk to the people before, like the product, the lifecycle of the product. So the people purchasing purchasing the product through engineering all the way to quality and manufacturing. They can all collaborate and really expands that central source of truth to outside of engineering. And even further, and even a conversation we're still having today is a lot of people are moving to the cloud, taking your, server information to the cloud. No one wants to host hardware anymore and having the overhead to maintain that with your IT, having to maintain that and watching out for all these viruses and things like that. Like that, we're still having that conversation with customers, but a lot of folks are moving to the cloud for that ease of use and also being able to like spin up a quick virtual machine when needed for certain uh, projects. Generative design, being able to put some outputs or give some boundary conditions to your design. And this is the first time we're actually having the software think for us. For how to create the design. We just give it some inputs, and then it tells us, okay, here are thousands of different ways this can be achieved. And it gives you this alien ergonomic looking type of design, and you can, choose from one of them. You can build one yourself that's similar to that design, which you may have not even thought about since there are thousands of different ones to choose from. That really gives us this, that really started the transition over to what computer thinking and cognitive creation of computers are like heading towards. And then fast forward to the AI part.
which is where we're at today. And this is where we're seeing a new change, a new wave in how engineers are going to be utilizing some of their different tools. You're going to be seeing natural language models being out there into some of your products. Now, workflows are going to be changing dramatically. Where previously engineers really needed to understand where all the different picks and clicks are within a tool, now they'll be able to transition away from that and use their natural language to really tell the software what they're trying to achieve, and the tool's going to do that for them.
Exactly. And what makes this one different from every other previous shift on that timeline is exactly what's on the next slide here.
And that is the core idea now. So this is the AI shift from procedural to intentional. And really, this is, I believe, where a lot of engineers are going to end up focusing on, and really kind of changing their overall idea and philosophy. Where today, engineers focus on how to execute within the tool itself. But now with the introduction of AI, engineers are really going to be able to tell the software what they're trying to achieve, what output they want, and then the tool is going to be able to handle the rest for them. So it's really a whole new fundamental change in terms of how the work is going to get done. Not all the time. I would probably think that AI is going to be faster in terms of achieving the end result from point A to point B with the amount of picks and clicks that it used to take within software. But where you're going to really see a difference here is how engineers are interacting within their tool. The entire relationship is going to be completely different now, with this natural language model that they'll be able to interact with.
Yeah, exactly. And to kind of illustrate the purpose here, the shift, I thought of the idea of, have you if you for the Marvel fans out there, there's Iron Man, Tony Stark, and you never see the guy 3D model, right? Who does he have to help him with all that? It's Jarvis, the AI, the intelligent design or person behind or the AI behind the scenes. And even when there was a scene where he asks it to modify the virtual 3D design they had in front of him, Jarvis or this AI, it and manipulated it the way Tony Stark or Iron Man wanted it to look. So just kind of think of it as you're starting to interact with this Jarvis, if you will, Autodesk assistant, if you will, the AI. You're talking to something that's like we're gonna use this term quite a bit, seasoned veteran of your CAD tools. You're talking to this the computer now, and it's working with you to get you to your end goal. So that's the another way that I like to see it. And some statistics that we're getting from the 2025 Autodesk Design and Make. And honestly, this is actually like almost 2 years or a year or 2 years older because this, if it's in 25, this is like data before that. Is that 48% of leaders agree that AI will destabilize the industry, and we think that number is much higher now. But as a true statistic, that's the statistic we got, and it's still pretty decently high. Whereas 39% of leaders are already using AI to be more sustainable, and only 2 years ago that number was 26%. So just imagining the amount of utilization of people taking advantage of AI, especially taking that timeline that we saw, the giant leap from paper to 2D to 2D to 3D. All these are large leaps that the folks who got in front of them are really able to take advantage of it. So that's the same case here that we're seeing for AI and the conversations Jeff and I are having on a daily basis.
Yeah. And again, this data, this is data that was captured essentially in 2025, 2024. So you're looking at data that's probably about 2 years old now, and we think that these numbers are greatly increased since then. Um, I think really what the change here in terms of the overall shift here is whether your organization is going to lead AI or just respond with AI, right? So that, I think that's what we're kind of get into this next slide here.
So business impact, I think this section is where most of you came here for because understanding AI is one thing, but knowing where it actually moves the needle in your company is different. So let's talk through it.
Cool. And we'll start off with this first pillar here, and that is engineering velocity. So engineering velocity, kind of think about what your engineering team actually spends their time on within a given week. If you really kind of look within a microscope and or a fine glass and really try to understand what your engineering team is doing throughout the day and throughout the week, oftentimes you'll probably find that they're updating things like drawings, parameter changes within their assemblies, maybe even doing things as exporting drawings, submittals, and packages. And engineers may even question, or even leadership may even question, do we even need engineering degrees for accomplishing this type of work, right? That's where AI is really going to be able to kind of offload a lot of that work and handle that all from the engineering team by single prompts. And what that's going to enable the team to do is really allow them to focus on actual business problems and allow them to really strengthen the business and continue the business to grow forward instead of working on some of these mundane tasks that they're doing throughout the week.
Exactly. And it also kind of ties into team scalability. So I like to break this up into two different items. It's the new users, 1 to 2 years, maybe fresh out of college even, that just joined the company. And then there's those veterans, senior designers who know the design and products in and out, been here 10 plus years, things like that. So for the first one, the newer engineers, uh, they can now accomplish work that previously required maybe more years of tool expertise. And that's because AI, Jarvis, works alongside them like a seasoned veteran that understands the product since it also has access to them. And Jeff, I think you had the customer example that I can kind of speak to that.
Yeah, and I do have a customer, Oldcastle Infrastructure. They have a trench division there. And the unique thing for them is AI, and I think the unique thing for any business, right, is we're all hearing AI and thinking that they need to respond immediately and bring that into their business as a solution. But in many cases, we're finding things simply as design automation being able to kind of help with overall efficiency that engineering teams are seeking. As was mentioning, Oldcastle Infrastructure, the trench group, they use design automation to really reduce the amount of bandwidth that they were using for their team for overall design. So they increase design efficiency by 70 to 80% for every project layout that they were creating there. And that's just an example of them using design automation to accomplish that versus AI itself.
Yeah, so sometimes customers are asking for AI, but what they really need is design automation. So kind of keep that in
Yeah.
mind to when you're like discovering like what maybe is the best for where your team's at today.
Hmm.
And my second, so I talked about new engineers, but how about the second one, the seasoned veterans, right? Skilled engineers or the ones that have been there a while. AI helps amplify their efficiency, which frees up more time for them, which they don't want to admit, but that will free up more time and make them work more efficiently. Example I have is I've been speaking with friends who are programmers at different other companies or even here at KETIV, and they've mentioned to me that it's tenfolding their output for script and coding. It's because it allows them to like debug their current scripts. They can just ask it to create the script for them, and it creates hundreds of lines of codes for them on the spot. And the reason why it's amplifying their work is because they're seasoned enough to know what a good output looks like. Someone who's new who comes in and has AI do the work, they'll get the same hundreds of lines of code, but maybe they don't know what good looks like. That's where the skilled workers differentiate themselves from the newer engineers is because they know what good looks like.
Yeah.
And lastly, there's AI guided onboarding. So the new workers don't have to spend, or the old workers don't have to spend as much time with the new workers to get them up to speed, but they still want to mentor them to a degree.
Hmm. Good point. And then for the third pillar here, this is where we get into sort of the risk and compliance area of it. And that's where AI is really going to be able to kind of be a leading, helping hand for your business and automatically be able to kind of do compliancy checks across your entire file library that you may have within your PDM-based systems. Imagine an AI being able to flag outdated drawings, identifying components that are outdated, or even areas within manufacturing that a drawing's not meeting those type of requirements. An example that I have for this is we have a customer here where they are within the architecture, engineering, and construction industry. And for package submittals that they need to submit to the city or through to an architect, it needs to meet a certain standard. They were able to use AI in their case and upload these package sets to have it cross-checked to make sure that it was meeting the compliance needs that it needed. Where traditionally this would be more of a manual effort in going through different manual sort of checking processes to make sure that it was compliant, their packages were compliant and meeting those standards there. So really for organizations kind of dealing with like regulatory requirements or even quality audits, that's a meaningful change and really gonna take a lot of the risk and reduction in waste that you may have when items are going to some of these different facilities or production or submittals that you may have. And you're gonna have a true audit trail utilizing AI in that way.
Knowledge accessibility. So being able to find files and data in plain language. So since AI is now in your PDM tools, it has access to everything. For example, you could find files associated with a particular assembly you're working on. Maybe it leads you to a folder that you didn't even know existed that maybe you could have only gotten through maybe tribal knowledge, right? Or you can ask it like, hey, I'm designing this stainless steel enclosure. Do we have one like this in our database? And it'll go in and look at all your engineering data and say, instead of you having to create one from scratch, maybe you have a very similar one. You can, use that as your template as a starting point instead, and it'll save you days of work without having to create that from scratch, right? All this reduces all the silos or quote unquote tribal knowledge needed to know where things are in your database overall and what's out there. And number two is monitoring the overall health of your data. You can detect maybe missing or incomplete data. You can find duplicate or redundant parts. You can monitor compliancy, like files that don't follow your naming conventions or are missing lifecycle states. Or lastly, you can even have it measure data health trends, like the percentage of files that are consistently failing, or maybe the growth of your engineering data. I had a customer who was wondering why their vault was growing so big, so we all hop on a call. And through AI, we found out someone was loading a lot of MP4 videos onto Vault. So we're like, okay, you need to stop that. That's a lot. That's growing it exponentially there. So the different ways, depending on your company's workflow and needs, is where AI can help in ways maybe we haven't even thought about yet. So very valuable.
And then the last pillar that we have here, and that's really impacts beyond engineering. And this is something, if you ask a lot of manufacturers or engineers, this is probably an area that gets overlooked a lot when it comes to AI, because mostly within engineering, a lot of engineering is focusing within the design phase, but they're not looking back. If you recall in the historic slide that we had there, we had a slide for connected data, um, how engineering connects to things like production, right? AI, when AI is going to be introduced into production environments, maybe you're utilizing CAM machines or CAM or CNC based machines. Imagine AI being able to recognize your tool patterns that you're creating. It's going to reduce the amount of rework that it's going to take from your existing libraries to create brand new products. AI is going to understand those trends and kind of really replicate what you've already done historically within your business environment. And then having these connected silos interacting together between your MES systems, your ERP, or your MRP-based systems, you're really going to close the gap effectively between design and make, right? So what this really means is you're going to see a lot less rework and surprises that may come up during the production phase.
Yeah, and it could be aware of like, hey, here's how you do your tool paths over and over again. So when you make a new one, it can kind of assume like, oh, you probably do it this way, but we can work together on this. So
Mhm.
it's intelligent enough to work together to get your end results there. So that's the landscape. Now, how do you actually get there? That's where KETIV comes in.
And this is really where we're going to start off with the data process foundation type of work. This is something that, if you know Brian and I, this is something that we talk about all the time. And really, before even getting into and getting serious with AI, really AI is going to be as good as your data is. So you can have the most powerful, AI agent out there in the world, or assistant, or language model that you may have built, or anything regarding AI. But it's never going to work for you unless you really are dealing with clean data. So if you are dealing with inconsistency in terms of your file naming or your file structure, you're missing properties within your metadata, you're dealing with outdated files or files that are all over the place in terms of like overall organization, AI is not going to work for you in these cases. It's going to work against you. And this is where I believe KETIV, we'd like to be able to position ourselves, and we're doing this already now with many of our customers, and helping their organization really clean this up and make their environment become a little bit mature so that it could be able to scale and grow into your AI-based system, or even having it connected to some of these different silos that you may have within your business enterprise too.
Yeah, exactly. Garbage in, garbage out. So make sure it's clean on the inside before we put something on top of it.
Yeah.
Adoption and change management. So if you're trying to better utilize the tools you have or learn more AI or not, we're happy to meet with you. So whether it's to review your workflow, what you're using today, or could you be using moving forward, we're here to help, Jeff and I. And as an example, throughout the years, been meeting with customers to talk about their current workflow, particularly around Vault, since that's one of our bread and butters. And to my surprise, I'm finding that customers are still using it as like a glorified data management solution. So we introduce things like features like life cycles, thin clients, job processors, whatever makes sense to cater to their workflow and help them collaborate and automate it. Fast forward to today, we're still having these data management conversations. However, now we're talking AI. Now we're having conversations around the assistant, getting them to 2027 to even be able to access some of these AI features. Moving them to the cloud is still the part of the conversation. One even wanted to create their own AI with their own tribal knowledge built in, so they can even double, triple their own output. These conversations are starting to shift more and more towards this newer technology. But it pretty much parallels the slide where we showed about, 39% of more leaders are using AI, maybe even more than that. So to summarize, if we haven't already met, whether you're a customer or not, like let's meet and we can talk about which technology or workflow suits you best.
Yeah. And I think that just leads directly into our next point here is how to get started. So what we're going to be offering as of today, I believe, we're going to be offering our KETIV AI readiness assessment. And really what this is going to enable us to do is work with your business and work with our KETIV team to really take a deeper dive and look under the hood and really see and understand what your current state is within the business. What sort of tools you're utilizing? What's your data look like? What sort of workflows do you have enabled or not leveraging at all? We'll help kind of identify where we believe AI can be a fit to deliver the most fastest meaningful return on your specific operation. So that's going to be something new today that we're going to be offering. So if that's something you're interested in, I would definitely recommend reaching out to Brian or myself, or just KETIV at general at ketiv.com, and would love to get connected and just kind of see how we can help in this area.
Alrighty. So that actually concludes our presentation. So now we can open up the floor for Q&A. And while we're talking about Q&A, I'll also just throw on this slide here in case you want to join us next week for that technical part of the conversation. We're going to do some demonstrations, or our colleagues rather are going to do some demonstrations on Inventor, Fusion, and Vault.
And that's really going to be touching on a lot of the newest features that Autodesk released within these product tool sets.
Yeah, thanks, guys. I think we're really excited for that session next week where we'll do that deeper dive into Autodesk AI. And we do have a couple questions in here, but before we answer them, I wanted to run a quick poll. This goes back to the slide that Jeff and Brian were showing just a few minutes ago. Really wanted to talk through all those different value points and see which ones mattered most to you guys who are attending the call today. So let me go ahead and fire up this poll and get your viewpoint on this question. So which of these business outcomes from introducing AI would have the biggest impact, do you think, on your organization today? We talked about, accelerating the engineering processes. That's that first option. We talked about being able to do more with less, scaling the engineering team without having to add headcount. There's that idea of compliance and reducing risk. Like we talked about that customer who's doing automated checking of drawings. We have the engineering knowledge aspect. This has become really popular with customers. Like we said, being able to dive out what's in your vault, figure out what's maybe causing problems, or help you with speeding up project work. There's, of course, extending engineering data into manufacturing, which we ended with. So that's really compelling, right? Because you're taking that data thread, that AI-enabled workflow, and pushing it down to the shop floor, which we really think is interesting. And of course, maybe you have another idea, another way that you're anticipating or already are applying AI, and we haven't listed it here. If that's the case, that'd be option 6. So I'm going to go ahead and end the poll here. We had some good participation. It looks like this is kind of what I would have assumed. Let me go ahead and share the results here. That a lot of people are looking for that idea of reducing the engineering load, reducing the cycle time, just improving that process. And we do see a lot of interest here as well on that manufacturing floor, how we can extend this down. So kind of across the board, but yeah, really interesting results. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and end the poll here. And I did want to introduce those ideas for questions. So if there's any additional questions, please throw them in right now. I do have a couple loaded that I'm going to throw out. So let's see. We've got one here from Gerald. It says, we're interested in AI, but we don't have a dedicated AI team. Where do you recommend we start? I don't know, Brian or Jeff, which of you wants to take this one?
I guess I could share some insights into what I'm seeing some of our current customer base kind of tackling this exact kind of question. What I've kind of heard from customers, what they're starting to do is, and again, you're in a different case because you haven't really kind of investigated into this yet. But what they like to do is kind of find pain points and gaps within their actual workflows, whether it's in engineering or just in the business at a larger general sense, because I do believe AI touches everything within the business, not just within engineering. Us being engineers tend to just focus on our day-to-day operation, but if you really kind of look at it at an overall approach, the big picture, AI could really touch every different department within the business itself. So if you really want to see how AI could help the company as a whole, you may want to come up with a some sort of group workforce that is able to represent each part of the business, whether it's procurement, production, engineering, you name it, and then allow yourselves to really collaborate together and map out areas where there's inefficiencies, where you think that you could evolve certain areas and come up with more faster approaches or results. I'm hearing some of my customers, they're doing this. So many customers have like a dedicated R&D team using using almost like a dedicated R&D team sort of approach, but for AI, and bringing in these key individuals to kind of tackle AI and see how they can leverage it.
And I want to take a stab at it too, if you guys don't mind, is like that's part of the point of AI is like you don't need to have a whole team dedicated to it, especially if you're a smaller company, smaller team, and you guys are already wearing multiple hats. AI is there to help, is like in your like CAD tools. Like that's going to be one of the examples for next week, but it's in the tool itself. So as long as you're like using it as a tool, like then you're using it. You don't need to have the team dedicated for it. Where some companies do have the luxury of that, but it kind of levels the playing field in that sense because you still also have access to it without having to have a dedicated team for it. You just leverage learning resources like our webinar today or YouTube videos of just how people are using AI. But you have access to it today as long as you have like 27 installed for the Autodesk parts of it, Autodesk products.
And another thing too is take advantage of the quick wins that you could get out of it with AI too. You don't need to resolve entire complex workflows. If you could win at little areas with AI, whether it's using it within some of your engineering tools, like and making the process a little bit more efficient there, that's a win, right? And that's going to help the team within design or drafting, whoever is kind of utilizing that specific area, and then find out how you could extend into some of the other key areas too.
Yeah, I think you guys are drawing two important distinctions, right? There's like two modes, like intra-team and then inter-team, right? Like
Mhm.
if you're just within your job role and you have the tools are there at your disposal, you're aware of them, that's great. I think where a board of AI focused people help is that discovery. Like, what don't I know? What wasn't delivered to me in an Autodesk tool? And then we start talking again, organization wide. Who's going to plot out the data and how it's going to flow, and how do you keep protections and security around that and make sure that we're operating from a top down mentality rather than a bottom up. So I think does come down to your team size, your organization size, what the goals are for AI. But like any other tool, right? It could be applied lightly or very dramatically in an organization. So
Mhm.
awesome. Got a couple more rolled in here if you guys are done with that one. So we have a couple questions around actually kind of related to that idea of how do you balance productivity and IP? So we have a question here from Mark. How do you balance the productivity gains of AI with the concerns around IP and security?
Yeah, so I guess I could start with this, Brian, too, is I'm seeing a lot. So the thing with AI is I've always heard of concerns about, protecting your IP. And the way I'm seeing this being countered is the creation of what is called MCP servers. And MCP servers is essentially a way to kind of block and really mitigate what's being protected within your internal environment, what you're able to kind of communicate. And they're using that to really allow AI and creation of things like custom agents for your disposal to really be able to feed into those MCP servers that you're creating for your unique company, essentially. And really, it's a way to kind of protect yourself. The MCP servers are only going to be able to communicate with your own data and what you actually are feeding that information to.
Yeah, and to add to that, I've heard of companies where they have their own GBT or internal, like you were mentioning, Jeff, the internal AI, where it's only going to be within the network, right? So if you're at your company, I would ask around and inquire about that because it's probably already there if not already. Otherwise, yeah, if you don't know, then I would for sure ask management or IT about your security policies because a lot of the customers we've spoken with, or at least the ones I've spoken with, they already know like if they can or cannot use Claude or ChatGPT because of company policy. Like they've been told yes or no, around that already. So if you don't know, definitely ask before doing so because you don't want to be that person to throw your IP out there. But if you can use it, or if you have an internal, maybe enterprise account of like Claude or whatnot that's only internal into the network, then you already kind of have your answer there. But I would definitely ask internally first before starting to use it.
Yeah. I think the kind of the confusion that we often hear is what language model do we start off with too? Because there's so many out there. And when you run into security issues like that or just company standards that are kind of set in stone, your company could be a full, Office 365 account. So really the only thing that you have could use is Copilot. Well, you're gonna have to kind of figure out what Copilot's capable of and what are some of the capabilities that you could actually produce from it, and utilizing that to its fullest extent. So there's a lot out there. There's a lot of information in some of these different language models that you can leverage. But I
Yeah,
believe MCPs is the way they're kind of protecting themselves from any of that information leaking out.
yeah, and start exploring also like add-ins too of like not to steal our thunder for next week, but like Claude can connect with Fusion, right? I think that is already public knowledge, but Claude can connect with Fusion, but that's an add-in that really allows you to use Claude instead of maybe Fusion's Autodesk Assistant, right? AI to kind of power or think behind the scenes. And maybe, one's better than the other, or you prefer one better over the other. So just know that they can also kind of connect over through add-ins and things like that. So if you don't prefer one and you prefer another, and there's an add-in that exists, then I would, then connect that and then use the one you prefer.
Great. Good points, everybody. All right. So I do have another question here I'm going to answer. It's actually an anonymous question. So I'd have to make up a name. We'll call him Steven. Uh, he says, our engineering department is a small part of a large processing company. We don't have mass production, but our process has a large piping system. Does AI provide help with piping? Now, this one, I wish I had Quentin on, right? Because Quentin's our specialist in this area. He actually
Yep.
did a KVA recently about this, but I don't know if one of you guys want to try to handle this or if we're just not qualified on this call and I can try to follow up afterwards.
Yeah, I guess I could touch on that too. It really depends on what exactly you're trying to leverage AI within your piping systems for, right? For one things that just come to mind that typically within an industry like that is they're probably going to want to do some sort of analysis, pipe analysis testing to make sure that whatever sort of processes are going through those piping, it is going to have meaningful routes for bending, expansion, things like that, or whatever you're connecting to. You're probably thinking about using AI to see if that's the best and most optimal design that you're connecting your systems to. Or if you're trying to have it actually generate your connectivities from point to point connections on your piping systems. I'm not sure if that truly exists yet, but I would even challenge that you probably could touch on it in many ways with some of these other LLMs out there, to see how you could touch on some of those systems. I haven't personally tried the assistant within products like Plant 3D for piping to see how that would kind of benefit from it, but I'm sure there's some capabilities that you could take advantage of.
Cool. Thanks for that. And yeah, if you have a follow-up to that, just send us an email at marketing@ketiv.com and I can get that to our piping expert and we can get more details around your specific use case if you have it. All right. So now Chad had a question who's here. If you could talk a little bit about how AI has or will be able to assist companies with doing takeoff estimating within the Revit platform for customized fabrication system. Any direction would be great.
That's
So
an Go ahead, Brent.
Sorry, I was just the thought that came to mind for me was when we watched Autodesk University, they did a lot of Revit, and that was the most powerful part of it. Like manufacturing was great too, but Revit was really the most powerful, and it showed a lot of like wind blowing into your building, and it'll adjust the building accordingly and take into account that simulation. You can modify all your windows accordingly. Like there were so many improvements that AI gave to the Revit and AEC world that like I can't really speak to that fully, since we do a lot more of the manufacturing here at KETIV. But we can definitely connect you with our partners who do, as well as definitely tuning into that Autodesk University that shared all that information around that. Those are my thoughts that come to mind.
And one thing that I have seen is there has been a significant amount of increase in Forma, and that's previously what was Autodesk's Construction Cloud. So Forma data management and using those products like Build, you'll be able to use assistants to analyze your takeoff points. But in other ways, you could then tie that into some of these other language models too, and run it through different various checks. if you recall, I mentioned one of my customers in the same sort of industry uses to run compliancy checks before submittal packages. And you could do this. I have seen some things for Takeoff specifically for it to automate, suggestions, takeoff points, things like that. So there is some tools out there and things that are being developed, and we could definitely help investigate some of those. But I have seen some stuff around that area.
Awesome. Great insight. And yeah, once again, not necessarily our core specialty. So there's, a lot going on in that AEC stack. And, what we saw was released a number of months ago. So I assume it's even progressed further than what those demos showed. All right. So we have one last question here from Eric. If anybody has any last questions, this is your last chance to submit. We're going to go ahead and cover Eric's next here. Is there any intent, and this is more of a product maybe question for the Autodesk product management team, but I'll throw it out here to see if you guys have any insight. Is there any intent on getting AI add-ins for Inventor anytime soon, just as Fusion works with Claude?
I have seen some things in LinkedIn that individuals are creating. Just posts, random posts that I've stumbled upon. I haven't seen Autodesk directly address this yet. I would anticipate that coming out sometime. I don't know when, but something that Autodesk always pushes us to recommend and things like this is if there's any feature type of recommendations, is go to Autodesk's idea forms that they have, and you could actually post a topic form in there for potential ideas that could be published in future releases or even updates of current state products. And if there gets a lot of voting for that specific topic and some visibility from Autodesk, they actually kind of push those up the ladder. And if you happen if you happen to create one, share it with us because we could actually share that internally amongst our customers. They'll all vote, get some wider audience and eyes on that. And Autodesk tends to, uh, publish those pretty quickly, I've seen. So that's one way I would start. I would assume so. I don't know. We're not directly tied with the
Yeah.
Autodesk developers.
Yeah, it's not formally on the roadmap for that yet, but the good signs are that Inventor and Vault got assistant, right? Like not only did Fusion get it, but Inventor and Vault, they're still making sure that that's being improved as well. And majority of our customer base has Inventor and Vault and AutoCAD as well, but that's also a good sign. Like a lot of folks are relying on these tools, and we'd be surprised if they didn't get, that Claude add-in as well. Maybe it's just not, maybe they just did Fusion first. So. I'm just kind of like giving you hope that they're throwing the investments towards these as well. So yeah, I'd be surprised personally if it didn't get one, but it's not on the roadmap yet. But I guess that's the best answer we can give just from my perspective.
Yeah, good point, Brian. I think, we saw that a lot of the stuff was released first in Fusion, and then, they brought it back to Vault and Inventor. And I think that's somewhat indicative of what we'll see, right? Fusion has really been a big investment for Autodesk. It's what I think they see as their future. It's a long road, to build parity with something like Inventor and stuff, but you can see the investment happening there. AI and those things, they're going to get introduced there first. So I think it's a good time to take a new look at Fusion, right? I think we have more and more customers looking at it with fresh eyes because there are things like simulation tools from Ansys integrated into that suite. There are what we talked about, the newest AI pieces are getting brought in, and it's just a more mature platform that's ready for business. So especially small startups, people that aren't so heavily invested in the traditional Inventor stack, it's a very reasonable choice now, more than it ever has been.
Kind of the benefit you see with it being completely cloud-based is updates are pumped out every month for Fusion. So you're seeing new features and functions being added every single month within Fusion versus, Inventor is, a desktop-based client. So there is, some protection Autodesk has to do in maintaining those.
For sure. And I couldn't imagine an IT team or engineering leaders having to deal with monthly point releases on a desktop app. Trying to keep that up
Yeah.
to date across your desktop stack would be completely nightmare. So yeah, it definitely breeds the ability to deliver updates to your user base faster when you have Fusion. Good point. All right, guys. I think that's all the questions I had. Anything you want to add? Any last thoughts, Jeff or Brian, before we call this one?
No, I
Oh,
think that
No.
was everything on my end.
I
perfect.
think
Well,
just kind of just keeping on top of it and just always like using a little bit at a time, little steps, of implementing it instead of taking it all at once, because that could be overwhelming. I think it would be the takeaway.
yep, for sure. And definitely stay tuned. We're not done with this topic. We're going to continue to keep our pulse, or keep our hands on the pulse rather, and continue to bring out sessions. So as we learn new tools, new strategies, customer examples, we'll continue to share that with this community. So thanks everyone for joining today. We hope to see you soon on an upcoming webinar or KVA. And until next time, thanks so much, Brian and Jeff, for all the time you put into this. And we'll see you guys out in the world.
Thanks, everyone.
Take
We
care.
appreciate it. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.